Welcome to the Real Estate Way to Wealth and Freedom podcast with Jacob Ayers, providing actionable content to help you along your journey to financial freedom through real estate investing. As the premier asset class, real estate has helped ordinary people just like you amass fortunes. The benefits of passive income from real estate investing will allow you to live a life you want. And now your host, entrepreneur, real estate investor, and apartment deal syndicator, Jacob Ayers.
Hi, and welcome to the Real Estate Way to Wealth and Freedom podcast. Hey, I'm your host, Jacob Ayers. Thanks so much for tuning in to this week's episode. I'm so glad you're here. This is episode 348. Well, today I'm excited to share with you our guest, Connor O'Brien. I am introducing Connor to the podcasting world for the first time. This is really exciting. Connor and I actually met through an accountability group. He and I have been touching base on a weekly basis for the past year and a half now. He's an awesome guy. He's an engineer, real estate investor, lives in Chicago. He's an absolute young hustler. So I'm really excited to have Connor on the podcast. Connor, hey, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me, man.
It's our pleasure. Well, Connor, hey, can you start by kind of telling us a little about who you are, what you do, your background, where you come from, just all that good stuff?
So my name's Connor, originally from Minnesota. I moved to Chicago about 5 years ago. Really moved here for a job. We're both engineers. I was, graduated my engineering degree, got a job out here, and been interested in real estate for really the last 4 out of those 5 years heavily. And I've been partnered up with Jake, actually. The first time I heard of him was on Bigger Pockets, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
Podcast. But then we randomly got partnered up through that 90-day accountability thing. This was over a year ago now. And obviously was super stoked because I knew you had been on the podcast and stuff. So a little starstruck at first, but yeah, over the course of the last year, it's been amazing. I feel like we've kind of been on a journey together. So yeah, it's been cool and definitely grown a lot in real estate in the last year since we've been doing that. So definitely excited to kind of dig into it.
Yeah, man, this is fun. You and I connect every week on a weekly call. So this is going to be really fun kind of digging into this podcast, but let's kind of back up, talk about your story. So, you kind of seems like you were kind of born with that blueprint to go to school, get a good education. You and I both went to engineering school, got good jobs, right? And then you were, at this kind of point in your career where you thought, okay, what's next? So how did you kind of end up in the real estate world? Like why, how, what, where? Talk about that.
So actually my best friend growing up when we were both in 8th grade, he gave me Robert Kiyosaki's book. It's funny because now he doesn't do real estate, but I've got a couple properties, and so he really kind of turned me on to it in a weird way. We're still really good. He's still my best friend or one of my best friends. And it's just kind of funny how that worked. Right. It was
yeah.
And ever since reading that, obviously that was kind of my goal was just like you mentioned, get the engineering degree and then get a little bit of cash and start doing rental properties. Cause you obviously read that in the book. And, when I first read it, and you Google engineering salaries, you think you're gonna take the whole salary home with you, and you're like, wow, I can get my first property after the first year of salary. I'm just gonna pocket all that that yearly salary, and obviously it doesn't work like that. But
something about these things called taxes, right, which are just a killer.
Yeah. So it was a little bit more difficult, I would say, to get into it than I was thinking it would be. But, I think with the right, you have people who hold you accountable and have other ideas and anything's possible, So, yeah, that was kind of how I got into real estate. And since we've been doing our accountability group, it's always good to talk about it every week. Right. So that's been huge.
So let's kind of unpack how you and I know each other. So you kind of touched on it, but you and I were kind of assigned through Bigger Pockets to this accountability group where you and I and several other guys just kind of got put into this, online accountability group, because we both bought the Intention Journal by Brandon Turner, right? Which I still use to this day. Absolutely love it. So you and I and the rest of these guys started connecting on a weekly basis it was, and you and I have kind of kept it going ever since, and obviously formed a relationship over it. So let's kind of talk about the power of just this accountability group and accountability groups and masterminds in general.
Yeah, to me, it's the thing, right? With something that is as complicated, and I feel like for me, my personally, I always looked at real estate as really cut and dry, right? Save up money and then you invest it. But like we talked about right away, is like all that, there's a lot of money involved, right? And how do you get that money? How do you structure deals? Those are all things that I didn't really understand going into this accountability group. And I think that's like one of the biggest ways I've grown is like, you know, I, I f- I think we all have a good understanding of what's possible, right? Hey, I want to be financially free. I want to have wealth, but then how do we get there? How do we connect that gap? And what I think a lot of people don't realize is it's people like you and I, you know what I mean? We're very similar. Like you and I were both engineers. You're
Yeah.
killing it on a whole other level,
No,
right?
not at all.
It's like I want to get, how are we going to get there together, and learning from each other on how, like, your seller finance deal is a perfect example, right? It's like, wow, like that's possible. You know what I mean? Like, and then the nuts and bolts, how do you structure that? Because that's really the barrier between getting a deal like that done is, having somebody who's done it before successfully. So to me, and then yeah, just the weekly accountability, like, hey, I'm getting this done. And if I'm calling you every week and I'm saying, hey, I still haven't got this done, it's like, man, let's figure something else out, right? So that the structure of that, and I would love to get into that because I think we have a pretty good cadence with ours, but just in terms of like reviewing the week, talking through your struggles, and then what's the next step, right? And then going
Yeah,
for it.
yeah. Okay. So I think a point I like to bring out here is one, I didn't really realize that about your path, having read Rich Dad, Poor Dad in eighth grade, and then kind of always knowing that that was the path you wanted to take. So, you went to school with the expectation to earn a high salary, and engineers earn a pretty respectable salary. But at the end of the day, it's not like insanely high or anything, but, you can live a nice, comfortable life. So, you kind of take that career path, and then from day one you kind of know you want to do this real estate thing, right? So then the where this accountability group comes into play, I think, is, it goes back to that Jim Rohn quote: you are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with, right? And if you don't have anybody in your inner circle, your peer group or your friends or family that are doing this real estate thing, then it can be hard to, like you said, kind of be plugged into that world. Now, in today's day and age with, Zoom and, the online, just world of real estate investing, it's so easy to go plug into a network like that and find somebody who's doing it, what you're doing. And that's what this accountability group's done for both you and I and others, and anybody else that's ever had been part of an accountability group, I think. So yeah, I mean, I think that that's really, where the power of that accountability group comes in.
For sure, definitely. I've grown a ton, grown an absolute ton.
And I think it's funny, just reminiscing on this accountability group that you and I are part of now. When it first started, I think it was like mid 2019, and so just the idea, the way I kind of differentiate accountability groups and masterminds, are accountability groups are like you're getting together with a few people and you're saying, hey, here's what my goals are, here's what I'm going to do, and then you meet back up with these people and you say, hey, here's what I did, here's what I didn't do, and you hold each other accountable, right? But it's almost not like you're holding yourself accountable to somebody else. You're holding yourself accountable to yourself in front of others. It's like they're there to witness you, like make that commitment to yourself, right? So I found it really funny. Like, I didn't know you at the time, but I'm like, I have to get this done this week because I told some random guy I met online in Chicago that I was going to do it. And what I do, I would do it. Or if I didn't do it, I pressed really hard to get it done. And I had a plan to, catch back up the following week. And it's like, why does that like trigger in your mind to like actually make you do something? What's your take there?
That's a good one. Yeah, I guess my take is, for me, like, Yeah, obviously, if you're every day, you got to explain. Every week, you got to explain like, hey, this is what I want to do, and it's the same thing as last time, and I still haven't done it. I feel like part of that is just explaining, coming up with an action plan, right? Like we do mins, right? We do like, what's the next step? We
Most
do
important next
Yeah,
step. Yeah.
exactly, and we do like, what's the big goal? So I feel like really like you and I, or one thing that you've been really good at in my life is just breaking down, is this really critical, Connor? You keep saying you want to do this every week. Is this really part of your bigger goal, or do we need to do something? Should we refocus a little bit? And then also just nuts and bolts. Like I keep coming back to that. Like I think that you've been really critical in helping me, like, what is the next step here to get this refinanced, and then we can kind of spitball and talk through our different experiences. Like, obviously, like, we've really connected the last couple of weeks on just how hard it is to refinance in this.
Yeah,
And,
some more stories there.
yeah, so I feel like just talking through that with each other, bouncing ideas off you has really helped, and hopefully, got my fingers crossed, be closing next week on mine. So yeah, that to me is just having somebody to bounce ideas off of, and like come up with an action plan. Like sometimes I feel like I can sit down with a piece of paper and write up, hey, here's what I got to do, but in practice, there's probably a better way to do it. And I feel like, to me, that's what it is just talking it through with people. And then if it's somebody else's pushing, adding value to your life, you kind of want to, make the most of it, right? It's like,
Yeah, sure.
so to me, that's what it is really. And yeah, obviously a great group of guys.
And the value is like, more than just a one-way street. I call you and I talk to you about things and I'm like, oh, you just refinanced that 5 unit. Tell me, did you use a local lender? How'd that work? Or, you're really good about like the operations and actually fixing stuff. You're way more handy than I am. So I'm like, what are you doing about that roof thing? Cause like pretty unknowledgeable when it comes to those things. But, no, that's awesome. I think to pull out a piece of advice for the audience members, if you're listening in right now and you're thinking, well, I am interested in this real estate thing, or I feel like I'm in my own kind of echo chamber. I've got no one to, bounce ideas off of. I'd recommend, reach out to someone, start your own mastermind. It's totally easy. I mean, it's just a phone call, just set a recurring weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, whatever phone call with a group of people who are about doing what you're doing, maybe a few steps ahead of you or a few steps behind you, whatever it is. It's, totally doable for anybody out there with an internet connection or a phone connection or whatever. Right.
Yep, absolutely. I recommend that too, man. It's been instrumental for me, at least.
So let's talk about some of your real estate deals, because you've got some really cool and unique stories of how you got started. So tell us about, that first deal, what it was, how you got started, and maybe before you get into like the nuts and bolts, just talk about like maybe a little bit of mindset. You were a recent college graduate. You could have just, coasted through life and had a pretty cush job and, Netflix on the weekends and, taking your foot off the gas, right? But you continued to push. So talk about how you got started, why, and then what that looked like.
Well, kind of like I alluded to, this was always part of my plan. I wanted to be financial freedom. It's like you read that book, and I feel like everybody who reads it, right, they're like, wow, I gotta do something about this. So, I started working, and I really tried to save as much money as I could, right? Living in an apartment, renting and stuff. That doesn't play out as good as I was imagining, obviously. But yeah, I think I had been working for about a year and a half, so I'd saved up, like 25 grand or something like that. Um, so that was really my mindset, was just get a house as soon as possible. And listening to the podcast, obviously, I was trying to get one that was going to cash flow, right? So I was using the Bigger Pockets calculator every day. I was using the MLS. That's how I got it, right? It was just MLS, just how anybody would do it, right? MLS Bigger Pockets calculator every day. I was doing that, and then
just looking at duplexes in your market. Were you pretty set on like a small multi? Were you looking at single families? What was like your criteria and your goal?
My criteria, I was looking at multi.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that the more the better. But what I started finding was that in Chicago, a lot of the lots are the same size, right? So you go more units, you're going to go less bedrooms.
Yeah. Okay. If you're kind of getting the same square footage, whether it's 2 units, 4 units, whatever.
So that was kind of what I zeroed in on. Obviously, I was open to whatever, right? But if it was just if I was showing up to the property and it was the same lot size that everything else is, I was starting to zero in on like a duplex, just
Okay.
because
Yeah.
they're kind of small lots here in the city, and I wanted more bedrooms, higher bedroom units, just for the areas I was looking in. That seemed like the cash flow was getting better. And I'm sure as you can speak to too, like you start to get a feel for it, right? You start to get a feel for it when you when you see a property, you can kind of tell what the
Yeah.
numbers are going to look like.
Yeah,
So,
right. You kind of get narrowed down in that market. You can kind of tell, hey, this property is gonna, it's a pretty nice property. It might rent for 1,200 or 1,500 or 500, whatever it is in your market. You can kind of, that's what I love about real estate, right? I say it's tangible, and you can kind of have an intrinsic value to it. Like you can drive by it, look like, okay, that's a pretty nice property, and I know the market, and it's in a really good neighborhood. And you just kind of have a somewhat idea of its value, right?
absolutely, absolutely. And I feel like you and I both, we kind of narrowed in on a market right away, and we were able to do that. And that's how I got into this property actually that I'm in right now. It was a HUD 203K. So basically, I mean, like everybody, right? I wasn't saving as much money as I'd like to right when I got into a job, but I was able to, get about 25,000, which, if you're going to buy a property cash, in Chicago, yeah, it just was nothing was adding up. So I had to kind of find another way to do that. And for me, that was the HUD 203K.
So tell us about what that is exactly, because I'm familiar with FHA, right? Many people are. That's, Federal Housing Administration. That's the agency where you get some of these low down payment loans. But what is the 203K loan?
It is literally my favorite loan. I love talking about it on the forums. If you go on the forums, it's all over there, obviously. But yeah, it's amazing, right? It's a HUD product. It's an FHA product that basically you wrap the refinance portion of your wrap the rehab portion of your budget into the loan, and it's still only 3.5% down.
So you can
So
finance not only the property, but the rehab cost as well to fix up the property.
yep, absolutely, absolutely. And I mean, like everybody knows, people don't want to do rehabs, right? Because they just don't get it, or they don't have the money for it. So
Right.
that just makes those properties automatically more accessible to you and I and anybody else. So yeah, I found one that basically had a terrible tenant in it, and she had just completely destroyed everything. There was a mouse infestation.
Oh no.
Yeah, there was a leak in the bathroom that she had just wrapped a towel around and just left it there for probably a year. Is kind of what we were thinking. Um, so it was just all leaking everywhere down into the crawl space, and all the wood was completely rotted out. And I just remember seeing it, and the layout was like perfect, but it just had all these issues, and I was like, "This is perfect."
Now, I think it's funny as a real estate investor, you have to train yourself to look at these like kind of unsightly properties sometimes with these problems as opportunities, right? And I've kind of gotten to that point, but at first you see a property, you're like, oh, it's run down or it's got this problem, you don't want it. But now as a real estate investor and somebody who's always looking to add value, I'm like, oh, that's a problem I could solve right there, right? So it's kind of a funny just perspective.
Absolutely, yeah. So um, went through the whole HUD 203K process, and the way that it works is basically you have a consultant come in, they work with you, they give you an ARV, so you walk through with them, you're like, hey, this is what I want to do, this is the level of rehab I want to do, and then they're like, okay, here's the ARV, it works, right? um, It'll still be able to sell in this market with this amount of rehab, and you'll still make a profit. So they're saying, okay, this is bankable, right? And then you get your contractors in there, and you give them a scope of work, um, and then get bids back, and then basically the bank agrees to that. It's a contract between the bank, you, and your contractors, and then you close, and the contractors get to start. So what me and my dad is, we actually went in and we did all the demo ourselves, just so we could kind of see what it looked like.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
and yeah, I remember we got the bathroom floor up, and there was earthworms, and there were active termites in the property. We knew that when we got it.
Oh,
We
wow.
figured-
Yeah.
But yeah, so that was a nightmare. And yeah, there was literally earthworms in the floor because she had just let the water run for so long that it was so rotted under the tile. So yeah, it was a disaster, but we made it through, fortunately. That definitely was a good experience just to see how bad it could be and how you could get kind of work through it. And then now I live here, right now.
And that FHA 203K loan is a great loan product that lends itself well to the Burr method, right? The buy, rehab an important component right here, right?
Yeah.
Rent, refinance, repeat, right? And you've house hacked it, meaning you've lived in one unit, have the other units rent go towards your mortgage and subsidize your living costs. So then you're able to save more and kind of rinse and repeat, right?
Yep. So
It's
yeah, my ultimate goal was to I wanted to do the HUD 203K, get the house hack going, obviously. But then I also wanted to refinance out of that HUD 203K. So that would basically mean, so here's my numbers, right? I bought it for 130 and I put 30,000 into it. That was my rehab loan. Um, so, I'm into it for 160. And then I wanted to have, to me, a successful project would be able to refi out of the FHA. So I would have 20% equity instead of 3.5% equity or
right.
whatever.
Mhm.
Get rid of the mortgage insurance.
Yeah.
But and so we went through. I remember talking about this, but I tried 2 times unsuccessfully to do that. But the way I look at that, really, right, is that it was it's just like the Burr. And the cool thing is, and I don't actually know if this is legal, but when I got done, my contractor had extra money and he cut me a check, right? So I ended up doing it practically no money down. Because you end up getting most of your closing costs. I think closing costs for a $160,000 FHA property was only about 8,500, I think, is what I
Yeah,
was.
right. Wow.
So, then I get a check for $4,500 when I'm done, and so I end up only being into it for a couple thousand, which
Wow,
is
that is
amazing.
so to recap, you go out, you kind of narrow down in your market, you find a property type you want. You're just analyzing deals every single day until you're getting a real good feel for the property type, the market, just what's going on there. You finally find this target property. You do an FHA 203K loan on it. You finance both the purchase price and the rehab at 3.5% down. So you put ballpark $8,000 down, get the rehab done. Now you've got a nice rehabbed property that you get to live in with your wife on one unit and have a tenant in the other helping pay your rent. And then the idea is to eventually refinance out of that so you can kind of do that again, right? What an
Yep.
awesome strategy. I mean, like just the FHA loan in general, just doing a straight 3.5% down loan is great. But when you add that 203K loan component to it, wow, what great stuff.
Absolutely. I recommend it to anyone. And then the cool thing is too, right? Like, yeah, I wasn't successful right away in getting rid of the MIP, but I'm
Mhm.
paying down my loan every month, right? So
Yeah.
I keep getting closer and closer and closer. And one day I'll be able to do that, right?
Yeah.
I'm really close. I think I might be able to do it in the spring. And now our interest rates are low, so it's a win-win. So to me, that's what real estate is too, right? Is like, yeah, you might not have hit a home run, but you still got a base hit and you're still gonna make it around to home plate, right? That's kind of
Yeah.
how it is.
And you got in the game, like most importantly, you just got the ball rolling, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So
Awesome, man. So, that deal obviously worked out great, is working out great for you. So you decide, hey, this real estate thing, it's pretty cool. I think I'm going to keep doing it. Is that the path?
oh, 100%, man. Like, yeah, living for free, as they always talk about on the podcast, is amazing. So yeah,
Yeah.
the rent right here is $2,300. So that's the total rent. Upstairs, it's 1,275. So and my mortgage is $1,300. That's everything, right? That's the escrow amount. So that's the insurance,
Taxes, insurance. Hmm.
yeah, everything is 1,300, and upstairs she's paying 1,275. So $25 every month is how much I pay.
Oh,
So it's
your
cool.
portion of the rent is only $25.
Yep.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's probably a rent you can keep paying. Then that's awesome, man. So great.
So yeah, I've been able to save, and I lived here for 2 years. So I've been able to save tons of money. Every month you say like all your money was going to rent. Now
Yeah,
it's
right.
saving it. So
So what
yeah,
advice
man.
would you have to somebody who's maybe interested in incorporating this strategy, maybe looking for a target property, any kind of like insider advice, or hey, I didn't know this going into it, any kind of tips or advice you've got for somebody who's maybe interested in doing an FHA 203K loan?
Absolutely. Well, I just convinced my fiance to do it. So we're actually under contract right now for another one
Oh,
for
you're
a
going to do
two.
it again.
Yep. So
Awesome.
I preach it all day, man. But yeah. So I would, and actually, interestingly, her process has been a lot better than mine. I used just some random mortgage broker. She went with recommendations, and they've really been helpful. Like the lender has been helpful, helping her, and I had zero help from the lender when I did mine. So I would do a little bit of research, maybe look at the Bigger Pockets forums, try to find who's a good lender in your area, and you really want someone who's gonna make you do the process correctly, right? Like mine, I didn't. They didn't care if we were pulling permits or not. They didn't care about any of that stuff. They just wanted, let's try to close this thing because it's a mortgage broker, right? And ultimately they sell it off. So I would say, look, yeah, for any newbie, I would try to find either a mortgage broker or a bank that people recommend you doing the HUD 203K for. And then you need a contractor you can trust, obviously, which is probably the tricky part for most people.
Yeah, sure. I think you bring up a really good point there. Like, you did this deal and it worked out great, but you made some mistakes and you learned from them the next time, right? Like, you can't be afraid to, get into a deal and make some mistakes. I mean, you've got to mitigate those risks as much as possible, educate yourself, try to know what you're getting into. But at the end of the day, you're not going to really know everything or be able to mitigate every single thing. You just kind of have to take action, roll with the punches, and then you take those lessons learned to the next deal, right? And that's what you've done.
Yeah, another thing I did this loan was this time around was I put our mortgage contingency. I made that to be like 60 days. On my first one, I had 30 days, and for a HUD 203K, like a lot of people, I see people on the forums always saying like, "Oh yeah, you'll be done in 30 days, no problems." Like, no, man, this is not a normal mortgage. You have to get quotes. You have to get, everybody has to go sign off on everything. You get feasibility reports. There's tons of stuff you don't have to do in a normal mortgage. So it takes a lot longer. So that was another thing, just being realistic with everybody and saying, hey, it's really going to take about 60 days. We're trying to get it done sooner, but that's what I would say too, is just have a long mortgage contingency on your thing. And if you're putting out long mortgage contingency, you can put a bunch of offers out there. You're probably not going to get everyone accepted, but
Yeah, good point. Yeah.
put them out there.
So
So
this
yeah.
small multifamily thing is obviously working out well for you. You buy that first duplex. I know you're doing a duplex now, but that's not your second deal. You actually had a deal in between. So tell us about that.
So the deal in between was a 5-unit apartment building. This one
Now we're
is actually,
talking. Yeah.
and Jake actually has an 8-unit too, so he knows the struggles. But
Yeah.
that one's been a fun one. And that one is kind of right when I got onto or when we hooked up. That was right when I was starting to get that deal. So that's reason enough to have an accountability group right there. I would say is if you want to get to the next level. I mean, that was kind of what I looked at as being my next level, and I was only able to get there through this group that we have.
Yeah,
But
that's awesome, man. And we don't have to get into the details of every single deal, but I just wanted to pull that out. Like, you did that duplex deal, you kind of got your feet wet with it, learned a lot. Then, it's working out well for you. Your mortgage is $25 or your portion of the mortgage is $25 a month. So, I mean, that just allows you so much flexibility just in lifestyle in general. You're able to save some money, reinvest, knock down that 5-unit, and then you just go back to, you're wanting to do this next duplex as your primary residence, right? So you're going to move to
yeah,
the new duplex, do that FHA 203K loan again. And I know you and I have been looking at deals together and you're constantly looking to grow and expand. Talk a little bit about the market. You live in an expensive market in Chicago. So how have you been able to make that work? I know you've gone out of state and done some creative things like that. So talk about that.
yeah. I think to me, that's another reason for accountability, right? I think when we started talking, and your numbers in Kansas or
Oklahoma.
Oklahoma, right?
It's all south to you, right?
Yeah. No, yeah, your numbers are way nicer than we do up here, right? In the city. So part of that why I had to branch out and get into Indiana was just looking for those types of numbers, right? You talk to people and you're like, oh wow, they're doing that, and like that's one thing you miss with RIAs, right? Or like local groups is everybody's looking at the same property pool. They might be able to get a $15,000-$20,000 less than you because they're insider scoop. But when you talk to people, like you're in Texas and you're in Oklahoma, you got a couple different locations that you're familiar with, and I start seeing your numbers, and I'm like, wow, man, I got to really branch out. So um yeah, honestly, part of that was just talking to people in accountability groups and seeing like, hey, like the cash flow that I need right now, I'm not going to get it in Chicago. And to grow quicker, like you just can't do that. So yeah, just so everybody knows, this property, gross rents, this one's pretty special, but gross rents are like 2,300, and it's at yeah, like I got it for 160 all in with the rehab. So
Yeah, so that rent to value is pretty favorable, over 1%.
it's
Well,
pretty good, yeah, over the 1%. I'm not at the 2% by any means, and I kind of had realized that, hey, and looking around, I was like, I'm not gonna find something like this, easily. So, yeah, to me, I had to really branch out, and that's the reason why I went into Indiana. So,
I can remember a time like when a light bulb went off in your head, right? And you kind of had this idea of like, okay, this is a 5 unit. This is a commercial property, a little bit of a different animal than your duplex, triplex, or even 4 unit, right? And the way it's valued. And so you start increasing the rents, getting the occupancy up and stabilized, and you've got the expenses under control. And now you realize you've increased the value of this 5 unit significantly, and you've been able to refinance it and keep the velocity of your money and your equity moving and roll it into another property. So I think that's a really powerful thing and a differentiator between residential and commercial real estate.
absolutely, yeah, that's been pretty life changing. Even over, I've had that thing for like just a little bit over a year now. Um, and yeah, man, it's been wild, right? Because as we all know, even especially right now, like the market's crazy. Prices are inflated. Some places prices are decreasing. It's like those are all things that just change with emotions, which with everything. But when you have an income stream that's constant and you control that, right? And yeah, that's been really powerful. And I know we talk about it a lot.
Yeah, for sure. I want to talk about something from the listener's perspective. So, you and I, we listen to a podcast. We're in these real estate networks and different groups and stuff. And sometimes I see these headlines, and it's like 25-year-old owns $1 billion of property in just 3 years, or it's like just these flashy headlines. And my mind always, I know it's not the right thing to do, but sometimes my mind's like, what's that guy have or what's that girl doing that I don't? They had some kind of angle that I wasn't, I didn't have. They had some kind of advantage, right? And then my mind starts thinking, instead of just thinking, wow, good for that guy, man. Like that's awesome, So somebody listening might be thinking, okay, well, Connor obviously, I don't know, has some silver spoon he was born with. I mean, he's an engineer. He's a smart dude. He lucked out and got a sweet duplex or that 5 unit or whatever, but that's not really the case. I mean, you've put in a lot of hard work, and your story is one that's very relatable. And I just want to kind of pull that out, like you didn't have any kind of special advantage over the average everyday person per se,
Yeah,
relatively.
yeah. And honestly, to be pretty candid here, like, um, I feel like that's something we talk about. That was something we talked about early on in our group was like, where are we going to get this money? You know what I mean? Because that's kind of going back to what I said about in the beginning was, yeah, I thought I was going to be making, you Google like engineer salary, whatever, beginning salary 60,000. I was like, wow, I'm only going to need to work for 2 years and then I'll be able to buy a $120,000 house. And it's like, no, man, it doesn't work like that. And I don't know why I thought that, but so, I was like, okay, let me get a property, got the property. I'm like, how am I going to, now I'm going to live in each one of these properties. And that was just kind of a disconnect there for me. So we talked a lot, and it was like, I think, we were like, well, who do we know who has money, right? Parents, friends and family, those
Those are
types
your
of
first go-to sources for sure.
two sources. And look, it ended up being my dad, right? And honestly, it was a great deal for him, right? So just to get your viewers on board here, like my dad had an IRA. He had 115,000 in it, and we pulled it out at the top of the market. So this was what? Well, yeah, not quite the top, but close. It was
Something
like
like early 2019, right?
early 2019. Pulled it out and bought this 5 unit. And I'm not a great operator. I'm not like a Brandon Turner, Jacob Ayers or anything.
Easy now.
I was able to get this thing under contract. Yeah, it was not a home run. We missed a bunch of stuff in the inspections, right? Went through the toilet seal I remember I showed you, right? Like
That was a
first early
terrible picture.
yeah, there's like this basically tarp holding up all the poop and pee into this bathroom, and we had to go in and redo everything. So yeah, it was not a home run deal. We got it cash though, right? And cash is king, as everyone knows. So got my dad on board, got this property cash, um, and then did all these. Was able to pay myself out of pocket because I was house hacking all these repairs. So he got a huge tax return last year. He didn't have to pay any capital gains essentially because we have all these expenses of fixing up the properties. And then now he sat out a major
downturn, right?
Yeah, less poignant to talk about now because we're all almost back up to where we were. But yeah, he essentially sat that all out, and then now now we're getting it. We just successfully refinanced it a year later for everything 115,000, get it all back out. So it's like, yeah, you may not trust yourself with your friends and family's money, but trust real estate with it, right? Real estate is like, it's the way to wealth and happiness, right? So
right. I love it. I want to repeat what you just said. You said, you don't trust yourself with other people's money, but trust real estate with it, right? And I really think that's the vehicle that you're really investing in, right? Is the real estate. Man, that's so awesome. Just trying to recap, like, your general story, I guess one question I have for you is, like, why do all this, right? Like, you've got a pretty comfortable life. You could have easily just, done your 9 to 5, gone home, been comfortable, watched Netflix, bought toys, that kind of thing. Like, why do you continue to do this? What drives you? What motivates you? Talk about that.
For me, I really want to have kids one day. And I want to be able to pour into them and pay for their education. That's something I value education a lot. So that's something that I want to do. Also, I think we put a lot of faith. I saw, I have some uncles and aunts who put a lot of faith in like their retirement packages and the company they're working for. And I think that that's one thing for like you and I, in the private sector. We got to be careful, who we putting our trust in are these companies because they don't owe you anything. And, I've seen a lot of, I've been at the same company for 5 years. It's like, I've seen a lot of people get cut. It's like a sports team, right? You kind of, if you're not adding value, you can get cut. So to me, that was a big part of it, was just trying to diversify a little bit and make sure that I've got some income coming in if I do get fired for one reason or another, get laid off. And then like, you're not able to feel that pressure of just, what do I got to do to make more money, right?
Yeah.
So to me, that was a big thing.
It's just kind of for me, I think maybe it probably is the same for you. It just kind of comes down to that, having control over your own financial future and just, the ability to, do what you want, when you want, where you want, eventually is the goal, right?
Absolutely, man.
Awesome, man. Well, hey, your story is super inspiring. I mean, it's been a long time coming to get you on the podcast. We should have done this sooner. It was probably a little bit of an inside back and forth here, inside information here. But, if anybody's interested in learning more, I know you're very reachable on social media and Bigger Pockets and things. But before we wrap up, let's end with our lightning round questions. Are you up for it?
Absolutely, man.
All right. So the first question is, what was your biggest hurdle getting started investing in real estate? And then what'd you do to overcome that?
I think the, money piece of it was my biggest hurdle. Obviously, I think it is for a lot of people. And I think accountability, talking to people and having them say, yeah, you can ask people to bank you or to loan you money. I know that you do that, you've done that before, and plan to do it, on a bigger scale here. And just talking to people to get the confidence to do that. To me, that was the biggest thing.
Yeah. Awesome. Connor, do you have a personal habit that contributes to your success?
I think 100%, you know what the answer is going to be. It's accountability, right? Having those groups, having those mastermind groups to talk you through problems, figure out what the next step is going to be, and then ask you why the hell you didn't do it last week.
I like how you think of that as a habit too, because that kind of is what it is, right? You got to make a habit of checking in and, being accountable. If without the habit, it's like, you can't just be accountable once every year, whenever you want, right? So defeats the purpose. But well, do you have an online resource you find valuable in your day to day?
Day to day, Stessa, you know about.
Oh yeah, Stessa. I love that.
Stessa.
Tell us about what that is and what it does for you.
So it's an online, I would call it like a property management tool. And you link your bank accounts up with it, and basically it'll tell you what your net operating income is, what your what your expenses are, and it's also got a tax package. So when tax season comes around, you can just fire that right off. And
that changed my life this year when it came to taxes. I'm telling you, starting out, you have no systems and you start kind of building as you go. And it's cool to kind of see how we've both progressed with that. And, there's way more advanced systems out there, but for like where you and I are at, Stessa is a great tool for kind of keeping track of your accounting systems and your financial records of your properties. And it certainly helps come tax time. So yeah, I definitely agree with you there. Awesome. Well, Connor, what book would you recommend to the listeners and why?
It's the Checklist Manifesto by Atul Gawande.
Okay. That's a new one to me. I haven't heard of it. So I'll definitely have to check it out.
It's amazing, man. It'll change your life. Seriously.
Okay. The Checklist Manifesto. We'll link that book in the show notes if our audience members want to check that out. Connor, last question in the lightning round. If you're to go back and give advice to your 20-year-old self to get started investing in real estate, what would you tell 20-year-old Connor?
Get a mastermind group.
I love it. Get a mastermind group. Yeah, definitely agree. Well, Connor, hey, that is the end of the lightning round, man. It's been a lot of fun having you on the podcast. Hey, if people want to learn more about what you're doing, connect with you, reach out, ask any questions about a FHA 203K loan, where's the best place for them to find you?
Bigger Pockets, man. Any questions about 203K loans, hit me up.
Awesome. And social media, kind of the same old Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff?
Yep, everywhere, man.
All right, great. Well, hey, we'll link all your social media profiles, your Bigger Pockets profile in the show notes. As we're wrapping up, is there any parting piece of advice that you'd like to leave with the audience members?
That's my group, man.
I completely agree. Well, hey, it's been a lot of fun, Connor. Let's get you back on in the future. And thanks so much for coming on the show today.
Sounds good, man. It was great talking to you.
Thanks, man. Take care.
You've been listening to the Real Estate Way to Wealth and Freedom podcast, providing you actionable content to build your real estate empire. Nothing on this show should be considered specific, personal, or professional advice. Please consult an appropriate tax, legal, real estate, financial, or business professional for personal advice. The opinions of guests are their own. Information is not guaranteed. All investment strategies have a potential for profit or loss. The host is operating on behalf of the Real Estate Way to Wealth and Freedom, LLC, exclusively.